Welcome our new sponsor to the Man at 50 podcast, Scars and Stripes Coffee Company. They empower veterans to build their own business using their e-commerce platform. When you purchase from Scars and Stripes Coffee, you are buying from a veteran, and your purchase directly impacts the men and women who have served our country. Do more than say, thank you for your service. Order today and empower a veteran. Use vet code Brad Richard at scarsandstripescoffee.com. That's scarsandstripescoffee.com. Welcome back, everybody, to the Man at 50 podcast. I'm your host, S. Richard, author of the book Man at 50, A Journey of Crisis, Revelation, and Survival. So let's get started on the Man at 50 podcast, a podcast that is for you, your little person within you, your hopes, your dreams, and hopefully a new plan for the future. Welcome back, everybody, to the Man at 50 podcast. I'm your host, Brad Richard, and we are back with another episode. Today, I am joined by an author, comedian, writer, all-around multifaceted guy by the name of Frank King. And Frank is with us today. Welcome, Frank.
Thanks, Brad.
Nice to have you on the Man at 50 podcast. We have a lot to cover today. We've been talking and kind of, working together and collaborating on some stuff. And so it's great to have you on the show. And I know that you are so many things that you're doing, and your story resonates with me because my story is somewhat similar. And we're going to talk about your story first and then move into the book, Guts, Grit, and the Grind. Yep. Did I say that right? Okay.
Yep.
And we'll move into that as well as talk about the things that you're doing in suicide prevention and programs and things that you're involved with. Also, you're a multi-time TED Talk, a 5-time TED Talk speaker. So we can talk about that as well.
And coach.
And TED Talk coach as well. So folks, hold on, buckle up, grab some coffee or espresso, and we're going to get started here with Frank King. Am I correct? Did I read in your bio? Did you write for The Tonight Show?
Yes, I started with Jay Leno when he was just the permanent guest host. What happened was Johnny would decide at the last minute, Johnny Carson, on a Friday night, he would say to the staff, look, I'm taking next week off. Mondays were always Best of Carson, the rerun. So that meant Jay had 4 nights to host, and he averaged 18 jokes per monologue. So that's 4 times 18. I don't know what that is, but close to 76 jokes.
Wow.
So he got to where he was hiring contract labor comics who were working the road at the time. This is late 1980s. Hiring comics to write jokes on spec. You filled out the independent contractor form. They gave you a fax number, and I used to fax in 2 dozen jokes a day, and I averaged 1 or 2 in the monologue per week. And then when he got the gig for real, he cut loose most of the contract labor. They gave out a new fax number. I got it, and I stayed with him, faxing jokes to him until he left the Tonight Show. So about 20 years.
Wow, that's cool. That must have been a neat gig. Did you have a chance to meet him or
several times?
Spend time with him? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I saw him perform in Charlotte. Saw him after the show, and then I went to the Hermosa Beach Comedy Magic Club, where he used to go. That's where he would go and try out the jokes. I would fax them in. The staff would put them on index cards. Leno would go to the Hermosa Beach Comedy Magic Club and stand on stage with index cards and just go through them. And anyone that hit, he put in his pocket for the monologue. So
that's great.
Well, and back in the day, I would record it on a VCR. I'm a morning person. I don't stay up that late. And the next morning I would get up. And so it was kind of like watching the lottery show every day. Because I would be sitting there, I'd hear my premise come up, and then I'm holding my breath that he used my punchline. Because, we were all working from the same source material, the newspapers. So everybody's writing jokes for the same premise. You're just hoping he liked yours the best.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, Let's get started with my listeners are going to want to know most of the guests that I have on. They have a unique story of struggle um, and of learning and growth, and they've kind of been there, done that, but they're still standing and they're strong and they're doing great things. And so they survived, that that journey to where they're where it got them today. So if you can kind of get started with wherever you want to go back to, or wherever you want to start with, but let's hear your story a little bit, and where or what brought you to where you're at today and why you do what you do today.
Well, let's start with comedy. I told my first joke in the fourth grade. The kids and the teacher laughed, and I thought, I'm going to be a comedian. And then in 12th grade, I did the talent show. First person to ever do stand-up on the talent show, and I won. And I told my mama, I'm going to be a comedian. And she said, and I quote, "You're going to college first. You can be a goat herder when you get done, but you're going to be a goat herder with a college degree." So I went to school in Chapel Hill, got a couple of degrees. And then my girlfriend from high school and I moved out to San Diego. We got married. And just by chance in San Diego, there's a branch of the world famous Comedy Store, the one up on Sunset. And so I would feel a magnetic pull every time I drove by the place. My first wife was not big into comedy or me doing comedy, so I wasn't going there. And I really felt like I should be at open mic night every weekend. Back then, it was the beginning of the comedy boom. They had open mics on Sundays and Mondays, I believe. So 2 open mics a week, 30 people each open mic. And I got up on stage, and my first 5 minutes, I did well. And in my head, I heard myself say to myself, I'm home. I'm going to do this for a living. I have no idea how, but I'm going to do it for a living. My wife at the time said, well, that's great, but not with me, you're not. So she cut me loose. One of the nicest things anybody's ever done for me. She said, look, you've wanted to be a comedian since 4th grade. You go do that. I'll go move it back in with my parents up in Seattle. We'll just get, separated and divorced, and you can pursue your comedy dream. And then she said something that motivated me to this day. She said, but I've seen your act and you don't have what it takes. So there's nothing like the I'll show you attitude. So I did comedy, and I worked as a doorman at the Comedy Store, seating and greeting, and then doing open mic nights. And a year later, I won the Improv moved town, Improv Comedy Club moved to town. I won the funniest person in San Diego improv contest. And I decided to take that and go on the road. So I asked my girlfriend, now my wife of 33 years, I said, I'm going on the road to do stand-up full time. Do you want to come along for the ride? And inexplicably, she said yes. And so we packed everything that we couldn't fit in a little Dodge Colt into storage. Both gave up our jobs, the apartment, and we took off. We were on the road for 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop, 7 years. Yeah, I worked with Rosie O'Donnell, Ellen DeGeneres, Kevin Nealon, Dana Carvey, Dennis Miller, Jeff Foxworthy, Ron White, back when they were just, comics. And during all that time, I always wanted to make a living and a difference. I always wanted to, when I sold insurance right out of college, I got to see all the great old school motivational speakers like Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy. And I thought, man, I could do that if I just had something to teach somebody. So it did not occur to me that I had something to teach somebody until I made the jump from the bar room to the boardroom, from club comedy to corporate comedy mid-90s. And then I rode that wave until the recession. And in the recession, speaking business, corporate comedy business dropped off 80%. We lost everything in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy that we'd worked for 25 years. That, by the way, was 10 years ago this summer. And that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like. Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. A friend of mine was in the audience not long ago. He'd never heard me say that about not pulling the trigger. He came up afterwards and said, and I quote, "Hey man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I go, "Hey man, could you try to sound a little less disappointed?" If you want to know why I didn't pull the trigger, it's in my first TEDx talk called A Matter of Laugh or Death. So I realized that I could speak on mental health. And the trick was, Brad, I had to rebrand from funny speaker to speaker who was funny, because all the event planners, meeting planners, speakers bureaus thought of me as a funny guy, clean and funny. So my wife suggested a TEDx talk. So I said, I applied. I got the first one I ever applied for. I went up, I did 18 minutes, and I came out on stage as depressed and suicidal. Nobody in my world knew that. My family, my friends, my wife, nobody knew that I was living with major depressive disorder and chronic suicidal ideation. I came out on stage. And I realized when I was preparing for that talk that even though hardly anybody talks about depression or suicide out loud nowadays, if you mention the words depression and suicide out loud, everybody's got a story. So that I realized that was my lane to speak on suicide prevention. Since, and my family has a history called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide, my great aunt, my mother, of course, I came close. Everybody in my family, except for one cousin, nuttier than a squirrel turd. So it runs in our family. So I'm quite well qualified to speak on mental illness, mental health. But that's how I got into it. Then I've done 4 more TEDx talks, and I just applied for 3 more. Not going to be this fall because it's because of COVID, everything's virtual. But I applied for 3 more in January, which they're hoping will be live.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got into it.
Well, that's an amazing transition, and what I find interesting is so many people in the comedy industry that you were part of. Do you ever look back at those people and ask yourself, what are they doing? Have they moved on, or what are they doing beyond that industry?
Well, a goodly number of those 30 people I started with on amateur nights, I'd say 27 of them are doing something else. 3 of us are still making money speaking or doing comedy. Mm-hmm. And there are a goodly number of comedians that I've known in my career who died by suicide. So a comedian friend of mine who has had 3 suicide attempts, she's schizoaffective, lives with schizoaffective disorder. We started a podcast called the Suicide Prevention Punchline. Suicide Prevention Punchline is a takeoff on Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And we interview comics and other creative types and clinicians, because so many creative people end up dying by suicide more than just the average person in the population.
Why is that, do you think?
I believe my 3rd TEDx talk was called the Evolutionary Advantages of Mental Illness. Everybody I've ever met who wasn't completely dysfunctional, with mental illness, had some kind of superpower. Great writer, singer, artist, comedian, actor. And I said superpower to my sister who has depression and anxiety, and she goes, superpower? We're not the X-Men, we're the Xanax Men. But every one of them, I believe that mental illness is not a singularity, but it's a duality. It's mental illness combined with mental illness combined with mental ableness. That it's a package. That my depression and thoughts of suicide are just the flip side of my creativity, imagination, comedic ability. It's just the way my brain is wired. I can teach you to write stand-up. I can teach you to perform stand-up. What I cannot teach you to do, because if you're not mentally ill, is process the information, the input, the way I do. And I thought for the longest time everybody processed input as I did, but I've discovered that's not the case. I'm on a plane. We're leaving Atlanta. They just changed the rules to say you can use your iPad or iPhone on takeoff or landing if it's in the airplane mode. The problem with the flight attendant is she doesn't have that written down anywhere. They just changed the rule the day before. She could do the oxygen mask, floor path lighting, seat cushions in her sleep, but she's got to say something about the iPad and the iPhone. So I'm listening very closely to see what she has to say. She goes, ladies and gentlemen, due to new FAA regulation, and she's stumped. You can almost hear her thinking. Then she gets inspired. She goes, due to new FAA regulation, if you have small equipment, you can continue playing with it. Okay, I'm the only one on the plane doubled over laughing. My seatmate looks at me and goes, what? I go, let's review. Before I can review, she comes back on and says, if you have large equipment, you might have to shove that under the seat in front of you. So I'm down on my knees. So everybody on the plane heard the same information I did. I'm the only one who processed it. If you have small equipment, you can continue play as a sexual joke in my head. Mm-hmm. So that I believe is why so many creative types, comedians, actors, successful people, athletes, die by suicide. Is they're living with a combination of mental illness and mental ableness. I believe with kids, we should treat the mental illness and wrap our arms around and enhance, energize, and celebrate whatever their mental ableness happens to be. to change the frame for them. You know, in my TED talk, I said, look, I'm not broken. I was made this way. If we can convince kids of that, we could reduce stigma and bullying and, you know, and suicide long term.
Mm-hmm. It really is a perspective, a self perspective, you know, as far as a mirror test, like, not broken, just this is how I was made. And
Yeah.
that self acceptance. Yeah.
I started off the TEDx by saying, what if those of us living with a mental illness are not living with a genetic mutation, but an amazing evolutionary adaptation?
Mm-hmm.
What if it's like Malcolm Gladwell says of such things in his book, David and Goliath, a desirable disadvantage? You wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it comes with certain, as I like to call them, superpowers that my neurotypical peers can't touch.
Wow. Now, you took the transition from comedy into suicide prevention, talking about, you know, your realizations and things that you learned from that process. And you took it to the TED Talk stages 5 different times. And then that brought you to writing. Is that when you started the writing process?
No, I took my stories and then my mental health journey, and I combined those with, I studied something called QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer. It's a suicide prevention curriculum, and something called Working Minds, Workplace Suicide Prevention out of the University of Colorado, Denver. And then mental health first aid. And I took my comedy, my lived experience, and all that learning and combined it into a 1 to 3 hour either keynote or continuing education training. So I share my story, I share some of my humor, and then I share the nuts and bolts of suicide prevention. You know, how do you spot depression, thoughts of suicide? What do you say? What don't you say? What do you do? What don't you do? Because you often hear people say about someone who died by suicide, he never gave us any hints. We had no idea. Well, chances are he did hint or she did hint, because 8 out of 10 people who die by suicide nowadays are ambivalent. They want somebody to notice and say something. And 9 out of 10 in the last week leading up to a suicide attempt give hints, direct, indirect, verbal, nonverbal, behavioral. So 8 out of 10 are ambivalent, 9 out of 10 give hints in hopes that somebody will notice. Because anybody can prevent a suicide. You don't have to be a clinician. It is the most preventable cause of death on the planet. So I teach audiences what to look for, what to listen for, and then how to broach that subject or those subjects with someone they think depressed or perhaps having thoughts of suicide.
You know, staying with that line of thought, where we stand in our country today. You know, the suicide rates are exponentially growing, you know, and the curve is getting steeper and steeper. And we're going to talk about veteran suicide in the second part of the podcast. But do you think, I mean, what's your take on where people are at right now with how is it contributing to thoughts of suicide with all the things that are going on?
Well, last year, 47,000 people died by suicide roughly, and that does not include 65,000 opioid deaths. We don't know if there were overdoses, accidental or otherwise. So 47,000 people died by suicide. That's 1 every 11 minutes. I've seen several studies that say tens of thousands of more people will die this year, up to 60 or 75,000 more suicides this year, which would put it at about 1 every 4 minutes. What's happening is, and I've got a keynote called Social Distancing and Staying Sane, Don't Worry About Your Mentally Ill Friends. I don't think it's the mentally ill who are going to be dying by suicide in record numbers, because I discovered early on in this pandemic, in this social distancing, that as someone who lives with mental illness, I've got things in place, safe care plan, techniques that I use to get out of bed in the morning sometimes, just to get out of bed. But people with mental illness wake up in an uncertain world every day. So I feel like I'm pretty well prepared to wake up in this uncertain world every day. It's the people who are neuronormal or neurotypical, who had jobs, someplace to go, very much structure in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And now, they're maybe working from home. There's a lot less structure. Their time is their own. The world is uncertain. When 9/11 hit, it hit on one day and was done, and we began to rebuild. But this thing, it surged, it waned, it's surging again. Are the kids going back to school? Are the kids going back to college? I mean, there's no real. Somebody said to me, it's like this. If I told you, Brandon, okay, look, you're going to run 20 miles, period, paragraph. So about mile 15, you think to yourself, just 5 miles to go. But if I said to you, you're going to run, how far? Can't tell you. You run 15 miles, how much farther? Don't know. It's really hard to adapt to that kind of, uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
How long is it going to take? Is what they're worried about now is the flu that happens in the fall is about to intersect with the COVID. What's going to happen when those two intersect? So I worry for neuronormal people who are not used to dealing with this level of uncertainty. So I've been doing webinars, podcasts, radio interviews, teaching neuronormal people how to create a self-care plan: diet, exercise, good night's sleep, medication, meditation, some gamification. How do you get out of bed in the morning? How do you get to the gym? If you just don't feel like doing it. Also teaching them, again, how to spot signs of depression, thoughts of suicide, even by Zoom. Because one of the big signs of depression, one of the most glaring signs, is they let their personal hygiene go. Hair's a little dirtier, clothes aren't quite as clean. Now, I said to somebody, look, there's COVID casual, like this, t-shirt instead of a tie. But then there's, depressed casual, where they haven't shaved, hair's dirty, clothes aren't, So I worry about people who are not used to this sort of unstructured existence. I believe you need to control things you can control and have a schedule. Get up at the same time, go to bed at the same time, meal same time, meditate or nap same time. Plan your Netflix binge time. Keep your media consumption to a minimum, because it's all bad news, especially on the national level. The mass graves, refrigerated trucks, whatever. So I spend a great deal of time helping people who are otherwise, because what's happening, Brad, is they're becoming situationally depressed. It's not a genetic thing or a chemical thing with them. It's just a situation. And they've never felt this way in their lives. They probably don't know oftentimes what it is. Why do I feel this way? So I suggest, if you feel odd, contact a mental health provider and do a telemedicine interview and see if you are in fact depressed, and if medication, at least short term, is, indicated.
Mm-hmm. That's wow, that's so powerful to go over those numbers. And the way you explain that, there is a large part of the population that is finding themselves in a place that they don't understand, and they probably haven't encountered people in their lives that they've overlooked or didn't understand, or didn't really give a lot of attention to people that have mental illness or mental disorders. And now people are finding themselves in a similar situation, feeling uneasy and unsure and, scared and really kind of shaken up by the whole situation. And so those increased numbers for this year is really scary and really crazy.
Well, and 8 out of 10 people who die by suicide at this point in the U.S. are men, generally Caucasian, generally age 45, 54. And two reasons. One is people think all the manufacturing jobs disappeared overseas. Only about 15% went overseas. The other 85% of good, solid, blue-collar manufacturing jobs went to AI and robotics. So you got a 50-year-old guy who was the shop steward making good middle-class wages, and his job was taken by a machine or AI. And men tend to tie their ego to their job. So now he's cut loose and he doesn't know who he is. I mean, he's always been the shop steward. Now he's not. And they call them deaths of despair because men so closely associate their employment to their, their ego or their, how they view themselves. So
It's
it's
a,
in
it's a,
men, the
yeah,
second part is masculine toxicity or male toxicity where big boys don't cry, so men don't reach out.
exactly. I work with, men and women, more men than women. More of my clients are men, but the male toxicity, yeah, big issue, and identifying their whole being with what they do.
Yeah.
um, and any changes or modifications to that really can throw them into an unbelievable tailspin, and and basically no concept or no coping skills at all to reconnect with who they are, their real selves, not not what they do for a living. And
Yeah.
so yeah, big big challenge for sure.
Well, and that's the reason we are writing that series of books, Guts, Grit, and the Grind, on men's mental health, is because men tend not to reach out, but men do tend to take advice from other men. So all the stories in the book are about men having an issue, one issue or another, how they're coping. So another guy can read it and go, oh, that guy's, he's doing that. I could do that.
Now, is this your first book? Or
Yeah, there's 4 books in the series. Volume 2 released yesterday on Amazon. So there are 2 volumes. Volume 1, Volume 2 are now both on Amazon.
right, and the first one is Guts, Grit, and the Grind: Basic Mechanics.
Yep, basic mechanics.
And
Kind of laying out the premise of the series.
and then the second one that just came out yesterday, the title's the same, but the volume 2 is Advance.
Yeah, advanced something mechanics. Advanced, yeah. So it digs a little deeper. For example, it talks about men and women tend to accumulate friends through life. Men, on average, tend to have fewer and fewer close friends during their life. They have close friends when they're in athletics or the Boy Scouts, when they're in college, when they're in their Rotary and they're young. But men tend to shed friends besides the ones they have at work. So the book encourages you to find your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Either create one or join one. I'll give you an example. The VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, those halls all have a bar. And you don't have to be a veteran of a foreign war to go there. And they have dart teams, clubs, and dart tournaments. And they found out that guys who are not looking each other in the eye, they're throwing darts, they're staring down at down the whatever at the dartboard. They can talk about anything, things that matter, because they're not there to talk. They're there to throw darts, and the conversation happens organically.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way they recommend you go to the VFW hall, join a dart. There's a movement called the barbershop movement for African Americans, because the barbershop has been a safe place of refuge for African Americans for decades. And so you're sitting in the barber's chair, barber standing behind you, so you're not looking at each other in the eye. And again, men, if they're not looking at each other in the eye and they're doing something else, they can talk about things that matter. So there are a number of these movements to get guys together to begin talking about things that matter, whether it's mental health or I can't tell you how many people I know, men, who've died of colon cancer or prostate cancer because they've ignored their physical health. They refuse to get the PSA. They refuse to have the colonoscopy. And both those illnesses are eminently treatable if you stay on top of them. But, guys, I'm a guy. Why would I, so.
Yeah. This is just my opinion. I don't know if you share it or not, but I'm 56 years old, and I've never seen a time in my life where men need to step up into a role of protector and encourager and the camaraderie of other men and being part of a group and standing up in our communities, because children, women, and families right now seem to be so so intense and troubled and scared, and there's so many people that are looking for leaders. You know what I'm saying? And I see a lot of the men that I work with and that I associate with, they're not stepping up. They're sitting back and waiting to see what's going to happen and who's going to fix it. You know, and so where do you see male masculinity right now in the middle of all the stuff that's going on in our country? Do you
Well, I
think
think men, first of all, have to, the old expression, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need to create a self-care plan for yourself because you can't help someone else if you cannot help yourself.
Yeah, bingo.
So I recommend they interviewed a guy who was in the space station for a year, circling the Earth, and he was alone most of the time. And they asked him, what's your best advice for somebody who's isolated? Another guy who's isolated. He said, schedule. Got to have a routine. So until a guy establishes a routine, it's very difficult to help anybody else. And I believe men have to advocate for themselves, whether it's advocate for their mental health, physical health, or their finances. Don't hide your head in the sand. Call your cell phone carrier, power company, water company. Everybody's got a plan to help you through this and cover the bills until things return to near normal. But you have to step up. You have to admit you're struggling. Very difficult for men.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the first thing is, you have to admit that you don't have this wired. You haven't got it all figured out. You need to reach out for help, whether it's from your family or from, and again, as somebody with mental illness, I've created, they talk about it in the second book. It's a lot of automobile metaphors. So they said, you need a pit crew, like a race car driver.
Mm-hmm.
So when you pull into the pit, there are people there you can depend on who know the situation and can help you. And I've got a pit crew. I've got several people around me that I can be honest with about how I'm feeling. If they say, how are you? I say I'm wretchedly depressed and suicidal. They don't freak out. They just step up and listen, and ask how that feels and what that means and, what possibly can I do for you. I got a friend in Philadelphia. If I called him right this minute and said, I'm suicidal, I've got a gun in the house and I'm not sure that I'm going to survive the week, he would get on a plane and be here tomorrow to help me out. Men need to have people like that in their lives, male and female, who care about them, understand what they're going through. A pit crew, as we say in the book, somebody to step up and help you out. And you need to have that in advance. That's the nice thing about being mentally ill. I've got all the systems set up. So when this thing hit, it's just another day for me.
Mm-hmm. You already were plugged into your team.
Yeah, and I go on stage, I speak, I'm vulnerable. I talk about, my mental illness. I get choked up. I've got no problem reaching out for help if I need help, mentally, physically, or financially. I don't have to put up a front that I'm a guy. I'm I don't need anybody. I'm gonna pull myself up by my bootstrap. I let all that go when I put the gun in my mouth. And so that's the advantage I have. Vulnerability is my superpower.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'll tell you what, let's, we're just a couple minutes past our break. So I'm going to take a short break, sponsor break, and we're going to be back part 2 with Frank King. So hang in there, folks. And we're just going to have a quick little sponsor break, and we'll come right back with the second part of the episode. I want to welcome our latest sponsor to the Man at 50 podcast. The company's name is Pure Green, and they are one of the fastest growing juice and smoothie bar franchises in the U.S. They are taking on health straight on with some fantastic, healthy, delicious products. So I would encourage you to check them out at puregreen.com. That's puregreen.com. And I am very happy to be associated with the Pure Green family and very happy that they are a sponsor of the show. Have you heard about Anchor? It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. They have great creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you,
and it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many, many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you'll need to make a podcast in one place. Check them out and download the free Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm to get started.
And we are back from our short break. And folks, if you are listening to the second half and you didn't get to listen to the first half, I don't know how that would happen. But anyway, we are speaking with Frank King. He is a stand-up comedian. He's a writer, speaker, and he has done just so many different things in his life. I think I would say that today he is making a big difference in the world and dealing with suicide prevention and helping men as well as women cope with things in their lives and help them get through some tough times. So we're back. Welcome back, Frank.
Thank you.
Before we went to break, you were talking about the pit crew, and you know, I completely can relate to that. For the longest time, I had no pit crew. I had no team, and and I think we had this conversation before today. We talked about it, but I was a codependent man-child for 50 years of my life, and I had no male friends. I had no male support, and I had, like I said, I had no pit crew. And so when it came time for me to go mentally somewhere, I set up dead ends for myself, and I set up roadblocks. And even when I asked the right questions, I never got any answers back because there was nothing there. You know, I was bouncing it off of nobody. And so I know how important that would have been for me in my 2 failed marriages and growing up as a teenager. I had 6 brothers. Well, no, I have 5 brothers. I have 5 brothers plus my dad, and I'm the 6th. I'm the 6th brother. I got 10 kids in my family, and yet I was completely disassociated with my father and my brothers, and so you know, grew up very codependent and had no male connection whatsoever. I joined the military to try to find it, and that didn't work either, you know, for me. So yeah, what you're saying about a pit crew, if you can expand on that and maybe talk about the book a little bit more, because I think it's really important. I wish I would have had that, and it's available now. And I've read the book, the first one. I haven't obviously read the second one yet because it came out yesterday, but the first one was great, and I would highly recommend it. We'll have a link in the show notes where people can go buy a copy of it.
And I believe you're going to contribute a story to book 3 or 4, are you not, Brad?
Yes, I'm working on that. I'm going to be contribute a story to either the 3rd or the 4th volume. That's
and the book is 2 women came up with the idea. Sarah Gare, who's a therapist, she teaches suicide prevention to first responders, has for years. She went to Barnes & Noble to buy a book on men's mental health, thinking, you know, she might have a particularly needy student, a male, first responder who could use a book and couldn't find one. Went on Amazon, couldn't find one. So she thought, we'll write one. She contacted a woman named Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas, who is pretty far up the food chain in the world of suicide prevention, lost her brother, and she also lives with mental illness. So they got together and they called me. And they said, Frank, listen, we're writing a book on men's mental health. We want you to make it funny, and I want you to add the automobile metaphors. And I said, wait a minute. You 2 women are writing a book on men's mental health? Don't you think you might need, I don't know, a man? So they took me on as co-editor, and I added the funny, and it looks like an automobile owner's manual. Now on the cover, there's a guy with his head popped, top of his head popped off, and a guy with a screwdriver on a ladder looking in. And the idea is there's so many brain vehicle or automobile metaphors that work. For example, when you get a car, you need to do routine maintenance, change the oil, rotate the tires, top off the fluids, brakes. And so with your brain, you need to do routine maintenance on your brain. You need to eat right, as I mentioned, sleep, exercise, meditation, perhaps medication. Then when you buy a car, you prepare ahead for problems, whether it's an accident, airbags, seatbelt, shoulder harness, crumple zones, or it's a breakdown. You join AAA because at some point, probably, you're going to be out on the highway in the middle of the night, pouring down rain with a flat tire or a thrown rod or whatever, and you're going to need to tow back to the automobile repair place. So that's what I added to it was it's like brakes. We created in the drug and alcohol addiction sections, we talk about how brakes are a lot like addiction in that when you first start off with substances, it's not a problem. It's a joint, it's a beer, it's just to relax. And then if it gets out of hand, if it's a 6-pack a night and, and it's smoking constantly before going to work. And then as brakes do, they begin to get worn out and you start hearing squeaks. And the squeaks for guys, girlfriend left, lost the job. These are signs like the squeaking brakes that, something needs to be repaired. Until if you continue ignoring the squeaking brakes, the day will come when you push the brake pedal and it goes all the way to the floor and nothing happens. And the same thing can happen with addiction. If it goes too far, you push the pedal to the floor, there's nothing to stop you from going over the edge. So that's why we chose automobile metaphors. Here's my favorite. Don't you wish the man in your life had a check engine light? Something goes wrong, light comes on. Send him to the mental mechanic, puts the guy up on the rack. Bob, no wonder you're depressed. You're 2 quarts low on serotonin. So we thought if we made it, automobile related, that guys, A, might pick up the book because it doesn't look like a self-help book. And B, Brad, we think a lot of women are going to buy the book for a man in their life who has an issue and is having difficulty dealing with it. And the woman is at loose ends as to how to help.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think there's definitely there's a disconnect from a woman's perspective. The book, I think, is a great tool for them to kind of understand how a man's mind works, or they may see it like it should work this way. But I think the book is a great guide for them to go, no, it's not going to work that way. Because he's going to do it this way because that's how our car would run, or that's how it would work in an automobile. So I think it's a great tool.
We surveyed men and women. We asked men, give us a top 10 list of your issues, your struggles, your problems. And then we asked women, okay, make a list of what you think are guys' top 10 issues, struggles, problems. And there were commonalities on both lists. The order was not the same. On the women's list, money was number 1, they thought, for men. And for men, money was down there number 3 or 4. Okay, but basically the same list, just in different order. And then we asked men what kind of help they wanted from a woman if they were struggling. And we asked women, what kind of help do you think a man would want if he's struggling? The lists were completely different. Nothing the women thought they could offer was anything the men said they wanted. That's one of the reasons we wrote the book. So, like I said, so they can decode, not just what they think the guy needs, it's what the guys tell them they need. This is the help I need.
Mm-hmm. I think the book, the first volume, and I'm sure the second volume coming out yesterday. But the first volume that I read, I think it's a simpler version of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's more straightforward and it's more clear and concise. For me, it was simpler, to read, and it was, I understood things better than, actually I read that book too. I didn't get that much out of it. So You know,
That,
the
that,
guts, grits, and the grind is, in my opinion, it's more straightforward, and it's a better book, you know,
well,
to
and I read
understand.
Men from Mars, Women from Venus, and those two people, each one has been married several times, once to each other, and
Right.
divorced, and they're relationship therapists, gurus, and they couldn't get it right. The joke I wrote is like, you know, like a shop teacher with three fingers. Yeah, he knows how all the machines work. He's just not really good at it.
He doesn't listen to his own safety tips.
No,
Yeah.
they've
Yeah.
both been married several times, married to each other, couldn't make it work, and they wrote a book. Oh man.
It is kind of ironic, but yeah, definitely it's yeah. Well, now they also say that a mechanic has the worst car on the block.
Yeah,
Yeah, or a plumber
college
has,
children.
yeah, plumber has plumbing issues and so on and so on. So uh,
Yeah, cobbler's children have no shoes is an old expression.
sometimes we're our worst teacher. You know, when it really when it really comes down to it, I guess. So
Well, and you know what? Apropos of what we're going through now is a lot of people who are in caretaker roles, doctors, nurses, CNAs, other people who are caretakers, tend not to take care of themselves. They take care of everybody else first.
hmm
And we talked about you got to put your own oxygen mask on first and look after yourself so you can look after other people.
right. And I think when you pointed out, you know, as far as putting your own oxygen mask on first before you can help somebody else, that's kind of where I was going with my question as far as where men are at, and you know, and standing up and kind of taking charge and making people feel safe around them.
I
And
think
yeah,
I would say something of the reverse is true, that they need to admit to their vulnerability, that they don't have it wired, that the situation is so strange now that it's got to be a team effort. You know, I need your help
hmm
to help us all get through this. I mean, I'm happy to lead the way, but we need to, you know, this needs to be decision by committee. We
sure,
need to, you know, I think, you know, a good leader listens to the troops. My father-in-law was in the Marine Corps. He knew Chesty Puller. He was a China Marine. He was in China and then on Corregidor, then on Death March. But when we weren't at war, he would go into the enlisted men's latrine, and they had like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you know, latrines lined up. He would sit right in the middle on the pot, fully dressed, and just listen to the guys talking back and forth about the issues of the day. And that's how he learned what they needed,
hmm
which I thought was brilliant.
hmm yeah. That's now that's true leadership.
Yep.
So, so few leaders that I've been in contact with understand that, you know, and their sole focus is being the leader and quote unquote setting an example, but not really knowing who they're leading, you know,
Yeah.
and where they're taking them.
And I think a good leader, if they need help, will reach out, try not to appear invulnerable, you know, or know it all. Look, I need help. This is
Mhm.
something I've never faced, we've never faced before. And I can't handle this by myself. But it takes a certain special guy to be able to say, you know, I don't have it wired. I need help.
Mhm. But to bring a group of people together and approach it like we can get this done, we can take care of this, but you know, it's the take a village thing.
Yeah,
It
I
takes a
think so.
village.
Look, and you guys are all very talented. I respect your opinions. Now, let's sit down. Let's get organized. How are we going to get through this? How are
Right.
we going to get through this?
Right. Yeah, and I guess that's what I see not being done in a lot of the circles and a lot of the groups that I'm part of. Um, the inaction and wanting to find their group, find their tribe, like you talked about, uh, and that's really important. Um, you know, I have days that I don't want to do anything but be connected to my online friends, because when I'm at work in my job, um, the energy and the camaraderie and the team building, uh, it's lacking to a degree where all I can think about is getting back to the online connections. You know, the positive thinking and the team spirit, and we can do things together, and we can make, you know, great changes and make things happen. Um, so I gravitate to the people that are moving and that are planning and that want me to be part of their group. And so for me, it's so important. And I kind of miss being able to do it in person, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree.
right now, I'm a in-person person, um, and the online thing is all we have right now. But I really miss the one-on-one contact. And you as a comedian, I'm sure you do as well. You know,
Yeah,
so
it's
it's
better to have a live audience, trust me.
yeah. Well, you do you get recharged from the audience?
I find that speaking and doing comedy, because they're separate, they're separate gigs. When I was on the cruise ships, I just did comedy. I didn't have to make any points, no action items, no takeaways. I was just funny
Hmm.
and interacted quite a bit with the audience. And I found that invigorating. And then when I speak, it's more substance, less funny, but still, it's conceivable when I speak because of the things people say when they come up afterwards that perhaps we saved a life or two that day. That's very therapeutic for me.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I had it, I think I told you this. Not today, but I think I told you this when we talked before. Um, I grew up wanting to be in the music industry.
Yeah.
I too wanted to be an entertainer, you know, like you were, and and for me, I drew a lot of energy from crowds, and
Yeah.
when I did singing and when I was singing and entertaining people, I would draw that energy from them, and that fueled me. Um, and it's funny because now I'm not on stage as far as a singer or an Elvis impersonator. Um, you know, I'm just a mentor and a speaker, but the level of energy and satisfaction is actually greater than it was when I used to sing in front of people. You know, and there's nothing. It's hard to replace that feeling of someone looking at you and saying, "You made a difference,"
Yeah.
and you said it or you worded it in just the right way that it sunk in and it clicked and it made a difference. Um,
I've had people say to me after hearing my TEDx, one of my TEDx talks, look, I've got the same issue. I could I could never put it into words, and you expressed it exactly as I feel it.
mhm.
And then they'll have somebody they care about watch it. You always ask how I'm feeling. Watch this.
Exactly. Well, as we're almost out of time and we're gonna wrap it up. But I wanted to, from you, I wanted to hear what are three signs that people can look for if they think a friend or a loved one, coworker, family member, may be suicidal or maybe having some mental health issues. What are three things people can look for? And then I want to end the podcast with talking about the veterans out there because we're losing so many of them each and every day.
Well, I think we start with signs and symptoms of depression, isolation, withdrawing from social activities, although pretty much everybody is withdrawing from social activities at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Eat too much, can't eat, sleep too much, can't sleep. A big one I think I told you was let the personal hygiene go because they just can't drag themselves out of bed to wash their hair, shave, or do a load of washing. People always ask me, what do you say at that point if you think they're depressed? This is what you don't say. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Turn that frown upside down. Have you tried fish oil? What you do say is, look, I'm here for you and I mean it. I know you're not lazy, crazy, or self-absorbed. I know that depression is a mental illness. The good news is with time and treatment, things will get better. I'll take the time. I'll help you get the treatment. And then you got to ask them, are you having thoughts of suicide? Now, how do you spot suicidal thoughts without them answering that in the affirmative? Talking about death and dying, Googling death and dying. Death and dying appears as a theme in their artwork, music, writing. They're getting their personal affairs in order. They're giving away prized possessions because they want to make sure that they go to the people they want them to go to when they're gone. Collecting the means to die by suicide, whether it's stockpiling medication or buying a weapon. And here's a counterintuitive one, extremely dangerous. They've been depressed for a really long time, and then for no apparent reason, they're happy. And it's dangerous because you're happy, because they're happy. It may be they've selected time, place, and method. And they know that the pain is finite. It's coming to an end, because what a lot of people don't understand is suicide is often not wanting to die. It's wanting simply to end the pain. So let's say they're depressed and they say they're having thoughts of suicide. What do you say? Do you have a plan? If they have a plan, what is your plan? If it's detailed, you need to get them on the phone with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If they won't pick up the phone, you pick it up, you call the volunteer, and they'll do what they can to get the phone in the hand of the person who's in crisis. Or if it's a young person, there's a text line. Text the word HELP to 741-741. Now, let's say the plan is not particularly detailed. Then my next question always is, well, are you going to kill yourself? And if they say no, and I believe this is the most important question, then I say, tell me why not. Make them give voice to why they're not going to kill themselves. My friends, my family, my animals, whatever. But make them give voice to why they're not going to end their lives.
Have them speak it out.
Yep. Have them give voice to it. Yeah, say it out loud. Why not? Okay? If you're not going to kill yourself, tell me why not.
Yeah, those are good things. For sure. When it comes to our veterans, are you a veteran?
No, I was in ROTC in high school, but no,
Okay.
Listen, Brad, the military and comedians don't mix that well.
Yeah. Yeah, drill sergeants usually don't like the funny guys. So.
No. Most comedians have problems with authority, so it's not really a good career choice.
Yeah, it's not. Trust me, I tried to be funny and crack some jokes, and it didn't go over well.
No.
So, but I had 7 years in the Army as a military police officer, and so I mean, I'm connected to the vets that are out there. One of my sponsors is Scars and Stripes Coffee, and so I'm connected and I network with those guys on sales calls and sales chats and stuff. And they're all doing that to keep their minds busy and to stay connected with fellow veterans. Now, myself and others, when it comes to the sheer numbers of suicides that the veterans are seeing each and every day.
And active duty, by the way.
And active duty. I'm not sure, but I'm assuming that the numbers of veterans committing suicide is much higher than the general population. Is that correct? Or?
22 a day, I think, veterans and at least one active duty. The Air Force by this time last year, had a record number. They had more suicides by this time last year than they did the full year prior.
Wow. And
since I talked to you last, I got a call from a woman, retired. It's a base in Missouri. It's called Joint Base, a joint base. It's Navy, Air Force, and Marines, I think, or anyway, 3 branches of the service are all on the same base.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been asked in the past to speak on base, but the problem is they don't have a budget. And so I said, look, here's my fee, but I'd really like to speak on base. So I'll discount the fee. And I got it down to where she thought, I think at $2,500, she doesn't have to go upstairs to get it approved. So we picked $2,500 plus travel.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping to go to Missouri to this joint base and speak to, the rank and file, because it's a big problem active duty as well as it is in the veterans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, the the tips or the three things to look for, um, would that go along or would that work for veterans as well? Or do you think because they're coming from a different mindset and they've maybe seen some things that the average population hasn't experienced, um, should we deal with veterans differently? Is there other tools and resources for veterans that me and my listeners need to know about?
Yeah, there are a number of suicide prevention lifelines staffed by veterans.
Okay.
So you need to ask Google, and that way you're speaking to someone who has spent time in the military and knows, of which you speak. And it's not it's not the people who went overseas into a war zone and came back who are having the greatest difficulty as veterans. It's the people who disconnected from the military after X number of years, because when you re-enter the civilian population, unlike the military where everybody's got your back, you've got a unit, you've got, there's cohesion, people looking after you. In the civilian world, that's not the case. And that seems to be one of the things that's most difficult for people who have separated from the military. Those seem to be the ones at highest risk because of that lack of structure and, and backup that they had. In the military, if you're in a good unit, you've got your own pit crew right there.
Right.
And in the civilian world, that ain't the case. Sorry. Sorry about that.
Hey, that's okay.
German Shepherd.
It's funny because when that happened, I don't know if you saw this, and we'll just kind of go off the cuff anyway. But it was on social media, and Damon Johns was doing a live stream on his porch of his house. He was out in the back porch, and it was so funny. The chickens kept interrupting his live stream, and he had to stop the live stream, get up, and go, I don't know, yell at them or shoo them away or something. But when that happened, I got that flashback because I saw it just a couple of days ago, and he was trying to do a business entrepreneurial live stream, and his chickens were interrupting it. So I don't know. It was authentic.
Parcel of the social distancing, COVID, virtual, whatever. And listen, speaking of which, I got to run. I got to go pick up a dog.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we're going to wrap it up. But folks, we're going to let Frank go because he's got to run. And we really appreciate you being on the show, Frank. We'll put your website in the show notes. We'll wait for people to contact you. Definitely check out the book, folks. Both volumes are now on Amazon, so they can get both volumes on Amazon. And to find out more about you, they can visit your website. We'll put all that in the show notes. So
thanks,
you bet. I'm going to let you go. Thanks for being on the Man at 50 podcast. And we'll wrap it up. If you want to drop off, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and close out the show. And we'll talk soon. Thanks for joining us, Frank.
Thanks, Brad.
You bet. Bye for now. All right, everybody. Frank is going to drop off there. And I think his family came home. And I think his dog came home or found his way into the house. So that kind of that was funny. Like I said, pretty authentic, and that's what happens in life. So anyway, Frank is a great guy. He's helping hundreds of thousands of people working in the field of suicide prevention. And I'll go ahead and put all the information in the show notes so you can contact him. Definitely pick up a copy of his book that he co-authored with the two other ladies. I've read the first one. It is great. And I think the nuggets that I got out of the interview, what I got out of my talk with Frank today is have a system in place, have a team in place. if you don't have a support structure, if you don't have a support system in place, then it's time that you create one. Um, and we all are going to have to come together, and we're all going to have to, at one point or another, we're going to have to be part of somebody's tribe, somebody's support network. And there's no better time than now to do that. Things are still rough for a lot of people out there, and the suicides in the military, they just break my heart, as well as in the general population. But like Frank said, you've got to be aware of the signs, and you have to just offer your help and your understanding. And just keep in mind that if you know of people that are struggling, that they're having some mental health issues, you give them your time and understanding. And if you are present and in front of them, like he said, 8 out of 10, they want other people to know what their intentions are. They want to be stopped. They want people to understand the pain they're feeling, and they want the pain to stop. And so myself and the listeners of the show, be that person to possibly help them get to a place of stopping the pain and getting a handle on it and getting control of it. So I want to thank once again Frank King for being on the Man at 50 podcast. And that's going to wrap it up, I think, for this episode. Thanks everyone for joining us. We will be back with another episode within the next week or so. We are scheduling more authors and more guests to be on the show. And so, we got a lot of exciting things coming up, and we're going to call it a wrap for this week. So take care of yourself. Take care of everybody. Remember to take care of your little me, love your little me, and remember, they're always with you. Until next time, this is your host, Brad Richard, for the Man at 50 podcast. And thanks for joining us. Until next time, bye for now.
This has been the Man at 50 podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Join us next week for our next episode and our next guest on the show. Visit us on the web at www.bradrichard.net. That's www.bradrichard.net. Until next time, take care.